So my name is Logan McInnes. I'm the Deputy Public Works Director for Utilities. So I oversee the water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities for the city. Jeremy Keene is not here today. He's listed here. He's our boss. He's a Public Works Director, but he had another engagement tonight, so we're kind of pinch hitting for the boss. So sorry that he couldn't make it. Talk just briefly about the organization of Public Works. Well, Public Works and Mobility is our official name. Historically, we're called Public Works, but wanted to recognize that mobility is a really important part of what we do as a department. So not too long ago, we changed the name of the department to reflect that. So as you can see in the green boxes, we have 4 divisions. There's an administration division, a planning and engineering division, street operations and maintenance division, and utility operations and maintenance division. So that's the box I'll be speaking about. So the 3 groups within utilities is Missoula Water, Stormwater, and Wastewater. And then we'll leave the rest of the org chart for the other folks. They can talk about how their departments, or their divisions, are organized. Oops, I guess I need.
I did it.
Oh, you did. We're running 2 different computers. I'm not a good multitasker. So yeah, I guess with that, I'm going to introduce Aaron Wilson to talk about transportation planning.
Thanks. I'll take that.
Yeah.
Mic too.
There we go.
Thanks. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Aaron Wilson. I'm the planning manager for Public Works and Mobility, and so I oversee transportation planning primarily, which includes a number of different types of work that we do in transportation. We're part of that overall organization of planning and engineering. So there's 2 sections in there. There's the planning or transportation planning, and then the various engineering functions. And so I'm going to cover both of those, and probably give a really short shrift to the engineers because I'm not an engineer. So, and they couldn't be here, but we'll cover enough of it. So within transportation planning, in my section, we have 3 main functions. One is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which I'll talk a little bit about because it's not just city focused. It's more of a regional planning group in the work that we do. We also have Missoula in Motion, and then the Bicycle and Pedestrian Office, which has been evolving over the years, and so that's another area where I'll spend a little bit of time and talk sort of organizationally about what the Bike Ped Office does. So, oh wow, well, maybe we won't talk about what the MPO is. It's a big mystery. Essentially, what's supposed to be showing here is a map of the MPO area, which is, we're a regional transportation planning organization. And so what we do is planning for what's called the urbanized area. So it includes the city of Missoula, and then think about those areas just outside of city limits where you have denser population, more development. And so we're federally mandated, we're required to do transportation planning, and we've been that way since the early 80s. It's based on population, so every urbanized area in the country that has at least 50,000 people is a metropolitan planning organization, or has a metropolitan planning organization. And our role essentially is just to ensure that there's good coordination on transportation, because roads don't stop at the city line. You keep going, you want a consistent transportation system, and so we coordinate with the city, with the state, with the county, our transit provider, Mountain Line, and make sure that everyone is thinking about the same things in transportation, and how do we coordinate all of that and make sure that services are continuous regardless of where you are in the area. We also get federal funding to programs, so we get planning funds that help fund the work that I do and our planning staff. We also are responsible for programming all of the federal funds that are spent on transportation within that urbanized area. So you can't spend a single dollar of federal transportation funds in that area without getting MPO approval for it. So it gives the community sort of a way to organize and think about how we invest those federal funds in our community. And it helps us coordinate with the State Department of Transportation. They have to come through the MPO to program funds in Missoula. And so that it just gives us a seat at the table to be more collaborative. We have some governing, so we're not governed by city council at the MPO, even though we're housed within the city. The city is essentially just managing our salaries and administrative sides of what the MPO does. We have a separate governing body, which is the Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee. So that's made up of city council representative, the mayor, 2 county commissioners, a planning board member, Department of Transportation, and then some other non-voting representation from federal highways and others. So, yeah, go ahead.
So is that a one of the boards and commissions within the city? So if I looked on boards and commissions, that's one of the ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Our meetings are all hosted through the city, and so you can see we call it TPCC, our Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee, shows up on that schedule of meetings, and as does our technical committee, which is Transportation Technical Advisory Committee, which is city, county, state, health department staff level to provide input on the work that we do. So it helps give that coordination amongst a lot of different departments and divisions.
I was just wondering if it was a one of the city boards or was it a special district? If it's elected. That's what
Not a special district, and it is a city managed board, but it's not officially a city board. I guess that distinction. We're a little bit of the like a stepchild maybe, where we work for the county, we work for the city, we work with MDT. We're sort of a regional organization in terms of the work that we do.
What are those, the third line down, TPC?
Yeah, so the TPCC is the Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee, and TTAC is the Transportation Technical Advisory Committee. Those are our 2 governing committees. So TTAC advises TPCC, and then TPCC makes the decisions and guides our work plan and essentially functions as overseeing the work of the MPO.
Thank you.
Yep. So we have a number of goals at the MPO, and in reality, most of the transportation planning at the city and the county and for our region happens at the MPO because we're small enough that we don't have a lot of separate city transportation planning and county transportation planning, and so the MPO really functions as the transportation planning for the region. And we operate under a set of goals that are established in our long-range transportation plan. So one of our requirements as an MPO is to do long-range transportation planning. We have to look out 20 to 30 years into the future, look at all of our needs, all of our existing transportation, what kinds of investments we want to make, and all of that has to be based in a set of goals in terms of what are we trying to accomplish. So we have 5 goals currently that we work under. One is, and perhaps the most important, is making sure that we improve safety and that we have a transportation system that is not causing people to die or get seriously injured as they're getting from one place to another. That's one of our most important tasks that we try to do, is improve safety in the transportation system. We're also really focused on sustainability and environmental things, so making sure we're addressing issues like climate change, looking at environmental sustainability, that we're not creating impacts on rivers and streams or neighborhoods. Thinking about mobility choice, so making sure that people can get around where they want to go regardless of what mode they're taking. So looking at all of those different networks and how they interact. And then trying to make sure we're connecting and strengthening communities. So thinking about those connections between different parts of Missoula and the surrounding communities, and that we're doing that equitably, so there aren't certain neighborhoods or certain communities that are being left behind in terms of investment. So there's a lot of thought there in terms of what areas have seen a lack of investment and how can we help those areas grow and use transportation as a way to boost sort of those communities and give them good access. And then finally, as Brian will talk to, we want to really think about our maintenance and how we maintain those assets over time. So all of the infrastructure that we build has to be maintained into the future, and so there's a cost associated with that, and we want to make sure that our roads and our streets and trails and all of the infrastructure is in good functioning condition and not deteriorating, so that 20 years from now, we're driving on gravel roads or have bridges falling into the river. So a lot of key goals there, but all the work that we do sort of tries to funnel into achieving these goals. So what I want to do, rather than talking about a lot of specifics in terms of what the MPO does, I thought you have this diagram in front of you. This is something we created a number of years ago to help illustrate the process that transportation goes through, from creating an initial idea all the way down through construction of a project. And it's intended to be not necessarily complete representation of everything that happens in the process, but sort of highlight the key stages as you go from an idea through planning and policy and design and then into construction. And the reason I like this diagram is that, for all of you who are, I expect, interested in both knowing about government, but also trying to be effective participants in government, understanding where you can participate and what that level of participation means, and where in the process you should get involved based on what level of influence you want to have in the process. Because getting involved when a project is under construction looks very different than getting involved when it's just an idea and a line on a map. And I think that's really important to understand sort of that process so that you can be more effective in advocating for your goals and your communities. So this is what we call a process roadmap. So it's trying to think about the decision points in the transportation planning and infrastructure design. Think about decision points. So where are we making key decisions and how can you get involved in that point of decision making? And then what level of public input? Because again, there's a lot of creativity you can have at the planning phase. Once you get to construction, you're really just talking about those impacts of noise and detours and really basics, and you really can't have much influence on what's happening with that project. And so we want to think about that level of influence and then outcomes and what do you want to get out of your involvement and being tied in at the right stage. So the first stage is planning. This is where we really are creative, thinking about ideas, looking at the issues that are in our community. Where do we have transportation deficiencies? What kinds of projects do we want to see in neighborhoods or regionally around the city? And we're really focused on that vision and values. So those key goals that we have, like what are we trying to achieve as a community? What are the projects that are going to help us achieve that vision? How much money do we have? How do we prioritize that? Good example, in our long-range transportation plan, we have our most recent update, we had about $200 million in discretionary funding to work with over the next 20 to 30 years, and we had $600 to $800 million worth of projects. So we had to make some really key decisions, though. What do we want to fund with that limited amount of money, because we can't do it all? So that really goes back to those goals and which projects are going to achieve those goals. So this is a stage in the process where you can really influence what projects are in the plan, where the funding is going to go, what our vision and values are, how are we actually trying to achieve those through the transportation system. And we can take a lot of public input and really think about our community and what we're trying to achieve. And there's a lot of data that goes into this. We do traffic analysis, safety, crashes, air quality analysis. So there's a lot of information that goes into this as well, but a big part of this is working with the community and identifying those outcomes that we want to achieve. So then the next step after we have plans established, so long-range transportation plan gets updated every 4 years. The next step is trying to think about how do we implement that. And one of the ways we do that is through our policies. So thinking about sort of one level down, how can we influence the decision-making process on those projects? This includes things like our Complete Streets policy. So that says that as a community, we're going to build our streets to be accessible for all different modes. That looks different on different kinds of streets, but when we start designing a project, we have this policy telling us we need to look at all the different modes and how do we safely accommodate those, or what's the design implication of that, and how are we achieving that goal. We also have our capital improvement program. So this is where we look out over a shorter period of time, so 5 years, what are the projects we're going to fund in that 5-year period. And there's a decision-making process there of, we have this list of, 100 projects. Which of those are we going to fund with the couple $1 million that we have? And so it's usually a list of 4 or 5 projects out of that several hundred or however many. And so you have to be really intentional about what's the most critical project, and there's policy and decision-making associated with that. We also think this is where we start thinking about our road design standards. So when we get to a project and we're designing it, what are the standards and how are we going to do that? And our design criteria. So when you get to a limited right-of-way and you can only build so much infrastructure, how do you decide what you're going to build? And these policies help us decide that. So this is a good place to influence in terms of public input. How are we setting that? Like, what are those policies? How are those policies related to our goals? And really having an influence at a higher level on, once we get to designing a project, what's the decision-making framework we're working in. And then we get into design of a project. So once a project's been identified in the long-range plan, it goes through the CIP prioritization, it gets funded. Now we need to think about, like, what's the specific design? How wide are the lanes going to be? Are there going to be bike lanes? Are there going to be sidewalks? What type of sidewalk? All of those design decisions happen at that project level. This is often, I think, where people get most involved in transportation, because it's a street in your neighborhood, or you can really see how this is going to impact. It's often, I see this as the area where it's accessible to get involved in transportation, you can really have an impact on what types of facilities are being designed in a project. The caveat there is that once a project gets funded and is into design, the decision of whether or not to do that project, it's probably too late. Not always, but generally that decision has been made at the long-range plan or that policy level. This is where we start to look at corridor studies, neighborhood infrastructure, specific project design, facilities planning, all of those aspects. And then finally, once a project's been designed and funded, it gets into construction. And as I said earlier, this is where you have really the least amount of input. So once a project starts in your neighborhood, you see a project started, there's very little ability to influence what's happening there. It's really just how do we mitigate those direct impacts of construction? How do we design detours? What are we doing to support neighborhoods or businesses, or the ongoing PR, like just giving updates about projects. But this is really where it happens, and we try to have some ongoing communication. And I like to say that projects don't stop at construction, that whenever we do a project, we try to evaluate. So we set out certain goals with our projects and in design. We want to evaluate whether we're actually achieving that so that we can go back in the next project and do things differently or understand how we're designing. Yeah.
So you've got public input on all 4 stages.
Uh-huh.
What does that public input look like at each stage? Is it different? And how do you go about engaging and collecting that input?
Yeah, that's a good question. So at the planning level, it tends to be more, we do community meetings. We have Engage Missoula is always a place to get information on projects, sort of from the beginning to the end. We do a lot of surveys. I think especially at the planning level, that's where kind of doing neighborhood engagement or ongoing communication, like meeting with us and having those conversations really helps. It doesn't have to happen just at the time we're doing the plan. It can happen sort of whenever, and then that gets fed in. So it's really broad involvement at the planning level, and we're trying to engage the entire community in that decision making. Policy level often happens at city council. We will take some projects out to neighborhoods or the community and get feedback, but something like the complete streets policy, we do the work, try to draft the policy, get public input when we can, but a lot of that decision making happens at city council, and so that's a good place to engage at sort of the policy level. When you get to design, it tends to be more focused. So if we're doing a corridor in a specific neighborhood, most of our outreach is going to be focused on that neighborhood. We'll do some broader community engagement, but really we want to know what the impacts in that, the people who are directly affected by the project are generally our highest priority. And again, it depends on the scale of the project. A neighborhood sidewalk project, we're going to be most concerned about engaging the neighborhood and the adjacent property owners, but if it's a big, like Russell Street project, we want to engage everyone because everyone uses it. It's more of a regional resource. And so those notices go out. We have our website. Engage Missoula, again, is a good place. We try to send out, get in the media. So it's really just trying to stay connected to those sort of key city communication tools. And then once you get to construction, a lot of that is kind of one-on-one, or we're putting out information, and if there are specific concerns with the construction process, we'll get people involved that way.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What about the Missoula Redevelopment Agency? How do you work with them?
Oh, we work with them all the time. Sometimes they are just funding projects, and so we work with them on the funding. Sometimes they're actively managing the projects, and so we get involved in terms of providing technical expertise or helping them with public meetings, identifying how it's part of the long-range plan, what types of infrastructure we want to construct. So it's really they're sort of a partner agency, and so they have money, and so they will often be doing projects, and then we work with them on the design and the construction and the outreach. But yeah.
You mentioned $5 million as a budget. Is that like general fund, city, county?
Oh, that's just a wild guess of money.
And is that like every 5 years or something? And I'm curious, like projects like partnering with MRA, like how much of funding actually comes from, I bet a lot of it is just like grants, you're searching for strategic grants that fit your project.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of our exact budget for transportation CIPs. It's, maybe, I think $500,000-$600,000 in road district, maybe $1 million in gas tax, and then some other small funding sources there. So it's not very much to do actual transportation infrastructure. Oh, and then impact fees tends to be $1 million to $2 million a year. And there's restrictions on all of those in terms of how you can use them. So that's generally where the funding comes from for the transportation CIP, but then you have the Urban Renewal District tax increment financing helps a lot because you can do bigger chunks of money at one time with that. And we've done a lot of really big projects using tax increment financing as the primary source or as a match or leveraging that to get other grant funding. So yeah, it's tough. There's never enough money for transportation infrastructure to do the projects we want to do. Yeah, it's really expensive. I mean, to give you an idea, Russell Street, the section that's been completed from Dakota to Broadway was about $45 million, and it's going to be another $40 million to complete it up to Mount Street. So that project, all said, which is about 1.5 miles of roadway, to reconstruct that and build it out to 5 lanes is close to $100 million. So yeah, and when you think about our discretionary funding of $200 million over the next 20 years, and a project like that costs $100 million, we can do one of those basically every 20 or 30 years, unless we get substantial amounts of grant funding. So that's kind of that's the background to all the decisions we make in transportation to try to be more efficient, and it's why we focus on multimodal transportation, because you can move a lot more people with a lot less infrastructure. Things like transit is way more cost efficient than everyone driving in a vehicle and having to have 5-6 lane roads everywhere, and there's just no money for it. And then when you get to the maintenance, that's even more. We have a lot of roads. All those lanes have to be maintained. They have to be plowed. They have to be repaved. So it's an expensive endeavor. I'm just going to go quickly through one of the other pieces we do. Missoula in Motion is our education and outreach. So we do all this infrastructure piece, but we also know we need to do the education and outreach for a whole variety of reasons, both from a multimodal transportation perspective, because a lot of the research has shown, that idea that if you build it, they will come is sort of true, but not really in transportation, because it's just different decision making and different routes, and it's not always intuitive to switch modes. So what Missoula in Motion does is do a lot of outreach and promotions, encouragement, trying to get people to try other modes, offer incentives to do that, education around safety and how to do other modes of transportation effectively and safely. And then there have been a lot of changes like COVID and telecommuting and trying to encourage places to offer, how do you offer telecommuting? Because that is a sustainable mode of transportation. It takes a vehicle off the road every time you work from home, and that can be really efficient in the long run. So there's a couple of programs. One is the Way to Go Club. This is our primary encouragement option. We have an online tool that helps people find routes, because again, the way you would bike is very different than the way you would drive often, and same with walking or transit. And so it's just getting information out there, helping people understand how to make those trips if they're interested, offering rewards and just sort of making it more fun to try alternative modes of transportation is a way to just spur that behavior change. That you try it once or twice, maybe you do it once a week, and then all of a sudden you find you really like biking or you find the right route, and then people will continue to shift that way. And it's a good way to do it as a very volunteer. We're not forcing anyone to do this. We're just trying to make it easy and fun and encourage people, again, to reduce the need to expand roadways for vehicular traffic. And we've had a lot of success. The number of users changes, and the people who are using it tends to change as people become more regular cyclists or biking or walking. They tend to use this a little bit less, but it's a good way to encourage people and offer some rewards that if you do it a certain number of times, you get all these partners that we have. Maybe it's a $5 gift certificate to 5 on Black if you sustainably commute a certain number of days out of the month. And so it's just that way to get people who aren't necessarily doing it all the time an incentive to use those modes. Then we also do a lot of workplace engagement. So we work with employers to help provide options for their employees, do workplace challenges to, again, just make it more fun and easier and more accessible to try other modes of transportation, and not something that feels daunting and hard to do, because often it's that first step of trying to do these different modes is the hardest part. And then we try to celebrate the success. Again, a lot of this is just creating the culture around multimodal transportation. Just about all of these people also drive. They tend to, take a lot of different modes over the course of the week, and we try to recognize that and promote the people who are doing this successfully and going from maybe driving every day to taking biking or taking the bus every day, and creating a sense of culture and community around that in Missoula. So finally, we have our bicycle pedestrian program. I mentioned this is changing a little. It's historically been the bicycle pedestrian program, but this is shifting more to a multimodal transportation system. So focusing on all the different modes and how they interact. And there's a lot of work that we do here. There's a lot of coordination with the MPO. But one of the programs we've established recently that I think will be of most use and interest to all of you as you start to think about your neighborhood is our neighborhood traffic management program. So this is where we go out and do quick build programs. So we can do those temporary traffic circles where you see there's just paint or delineators in the intersections, speed bumps, all those things we can go out and do, and we work with Brian's crews to go out and get those done in a day or a couple of days. And they tend to be really effective, and we can be proactive, so we can identify neighborhood streets that have an issue and go out and address that proactively, or we can be reactive, where we get a complaint from a neighbor about a street, people are speeding. We can go out and collect the traffic data and do these kinds of installments really quickly and really cheap. And they've been really effective. So they're lowering speeds, they lower volumes on local streets. We get fewer crashes. There's a lot of placemaking associated with that. So you get these traffic circles where people can paint the middle of it and create a place in their neighborhood that's representative of all the people that live there. And we found on a couple of projects have been really effective. So we did this on Alder over on the west side and found speeds dropped by 5 to 8 miles per hour. So people were going close to 30 miles per hour through there. Now they're much closer to 20, which is a huge change for a very small amount of money. We also saw on Kemp was another one we did, and volumes dropped by 33%. So people were shifting then, because it was not such a convenient cut through, people were shifting over to Johnson or Eaton, the collectors where we're actually designing for that traffic. So they can be really effective.
Sorry, so that quick way that just went in the north side last year is you did traffic speed studies before and after, and you found that there was a reduction of speed.
Yep.
How much?
On Alder, it was like 5 to 8 miles an hour. So that I think people were going close to 30 miles an hour up Alder Street on the west side, sort of between Orange and Draftworks. And now they're much closer to 20, I believe, or under 25 miles an hour. So they tend to be really effective. All right, so that's transportation planning. I'm going to give engineering a short shift, but so engineering, there's 3 sections. There's development review inspections, surface transportation engineering, and utilities. So those are the 3 main focuses of our engineering division. Development reviews is really focused on reviewing the engineering aspects of private development. So people who are connecting to sewer or water, or private street development or public, all of the public and private right-of-way, they're reviewing all of those projects to make sure that those developments are constructing the right types of infrastructure. So they're reviewing right-of-way permits, looking at subdivisions, making sure we have good infrastructure, and all of those developments are following standards. And so it's a really helpful connection between Public Works and CPDI and the work that they do on development review and making sure that we're all enforcing the same standards and meeting goals in our private development. And then in surface transportation engineering, they basically do, in planning, we get up through sort of a project design, and then engineering takes over and goes through the more detailed engineering and construction. So there's a really good consistency in Public Works going from planning all the way through construction, and engineering really just comes in at that phase. Once we have a project funded, they work with the consultants, or they're coming up with designs and getting all those plans ready and working with the contractors to go out and actually build the project. They're also doing the traffic studies and looking at evaluating a lot of the projects that we do, helping us collect the speed studies, evaluate all of that data, make sure we're actually doing what we think we're going to do. So they take the idea and they actually put the plans in paper and work through construction. And then finally, utilities engineering, and you'll hear a lot more about this, I think, from Logan and the work that water and sewer and others do, but they're working on CIP projects. These are all the utilities so sewer and water and stormwater facilities. And so the engineers are helping to detail those plans, create the projects, help get them constructed so that we have operating utilities. With that, as I said, I gave a short shrift to engineering, so they'll have to be here next time. And I probably went over time, so sorry about that. Do you have a question?
I have a question
Sure.
about this planning. Bear Tracks Bridge. It was in the process for quite a long time, and it's turned out to be a nice bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's completed. They expanded that bridge actually, widened it
Yeah.
quite a bit, and it was an expensive project.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got 2 lanes going each way, plus
Yeah.
bicycle lanes.
Mm-hmm.
Now comes along Higgins Avenue,
Yeah.
where we have 1 lane and bicycle.
Yeah.
Was it just that the Higgins Avenue planning didn't dawn on anybody before they spent the money on the bridge?
No, it did. So the Higgins Avenue project, there's a lot going on there. The Higgins Avenue corridor project that we just have sort of wrapped up, or we're wrapping up right now, was really just looking at what's happening on either side of the bridge. And that project has been on the planning side in the downtown master plan and others since probably 2009 or earlier. So close to 15 years that project has been identified as a need to do something better. What happened with the bridge needed rehabilitation. So the state did an evaluation of all the bridges in Missoula about 10 years or so ago, identified that a lot of them needed work. They were past their sort of useful lifespan. And Higgins Avenue, the Higgins Bridge, now Bear Tracks Bridge, was identified as a project to be rehabilitated. So when that project was designed, the way the State Department of Transportation designs projects is they wanted to replace what was there that was existing. So the existing travel lanes and sidewalks and narrow bike lanes. The city contributed funding to that to get the wider pathways on the side to sort of expand the deck to accommodate more use. And then the travel lanes were retained, but it didn't really take into consideration what might happen on either side. What I would say is that investment and the cost in that was the rehabilitation to that bridge. So it's going to last another 25 to 50 years would be what we hope to get out of that. A lot can happen in terms of what you do with the space on the bridge in that period of time, and it's a worthwhile investment. And I think the way that bridge was built is totally adequate for that 25 to 50 year period. But what we need to do is figure out how to link the bridge to either side. So once you get on the other side, you have good bike pedestrian facilities, but then as you get into south of the bridge, if you're on a bike, it just throws you into traffic. And so there's a real deficiency there on either side. So what we did with the corridor study was looking at what do we do on either side of the bridge in terms of the right kind of design for the context in a downtown and accommodating all of the various different uses there. And I could talk for probably the next hour and a half on the Higgins corridor specifically. And so what we landed on were designs for either side of the bridge, and we're not changing the structure of the bridge at all. It's just looking at how you tie those two together. So really what we do on the bridge is sort of irrelevant. I shouldn't say it's irrelevant, but it's not impacting that investment because we needed to rebuild the deck anyways, and we have that width, so regardless of how we use that into the future, we have that space available.
Rebuilding the deck is a lot cheaper than the project that expanded the bridge.
I was difference of about $1.6 million.
Which you could have used at one of those 20-year projects.
Wow, true, yeah.
Okay.
The other piece is that the timing of these things isn't always the most ideal. So, we didn't have the corridor study done when MDT was ready to go in and replace the bridge deck. And so we came up with the best design that's going to serve us for that period of time, regardless of what you do with the number of lanes or other facilities. And I think it gives us that flexibility, knowing what's going to happen in 20 years is really hard to determine versus, what are we doing with it right now today. So that's probably a bad description of that, but I could talk a long time about Higgins and that project.
I had a question over there.
Yeah.
Given the staggering cost of the 1.5 mile segment of Russell that you mentioned, expanding that to 5 lanes, we know that when we expand highways, traffic increases. And you mentioned that your office prioritizes these values of multimodal transportation and more sustainable transportation. So I'm just wondering how a project like that went through this process, like what community values and what policy goals ended up with this expansion project. I mean, as a cyclist, I know I cannot turn left safely on a 2-lane in one direction highway. So are there other incentives or other constraints that maybe were elided a bit in the
Yeah, I mean, the background on that is the design of that project started in 1994, and a lot has changed since then. So that's where it's taken us 30 years to build that project. And at this point, we're kind of constrained to the environmental impact study that was completed and adopted. So there's federal funds that are wrapped into that. There's a lot of sort of just bureaucracy in terms of like what you can do and not do once you have federal funds into a project. So the design there, was that was a state-led project. They did a lot of analysis about what they felt like is the most necessary for that corridor, and a 5-lane was sort of what they landed on, and that's the direction we're headed. And at this point, there's just not a lot of room to change that. So we're far enough along in this process that those decisions have essentially been made, and a lot of those were before my time here. Or, there may have been slightly different values. Maybe we do a different project now, but it gives us some capacity, and it's a key north-south route. So I think it was looking at all of those different uses like trucks and freight and moving vehicles, and also trying to accommodate safe multimodal transportation. So we did the protected bike lanes and better bus stops, again, to try to accommodate those modes with this other purpose of needing to move vehicles and freight and other traffic on that north-south corridor. So a lot of times you have those trade-offs of like, how do you do all these things in one space? How are we doing on time? Should probably wrap. Okay, we're going to take one more quick question. Yeah.
Quick question. You just talked about Fairtrax Bridge and the Russell Street, and Reserve Street is another one where it's really how does the MPAO work with MDT? I know somebody who was just hit by a 50-mile-an-hour car, and she's going to be, quad or paraplegic for the rest of her life on Reserve Street because there aren't crosswalks. Right. Talk about how you work with MDT and help us understand that structural relationship.
Yeah, so it's a collaboration. So the MPO tries to bring all of those partners together and think about the region as a whole. But MDT still has, Reserve Street is a federal highway. It's MDT's street. They ultimately get to make decisions about that. The MPO's role is to try to ensure coordination, and if there are federal dollars invested, that we're making the right investments for our community. But the MPO can't tell the state to say, well, you need to spend this $20 million here instead of here. They still get to sort of control their funding sources. They just have to come to the MPO and sort of, we have a seat at the table, I guess. So it's not we tell them what to do or vice versa, but it's we're trying to collaborate and identify those common areas of focus. And Reserve Street's one that comes up a lot, and it's probably one of the more challenging roads because it's trying to serve a lot of purposes in terms of being a highway, and also, people live along it, and there's businesses, and people try to cross it. So making all of those things work is often really challenging. So, yeah.
And MTT doesn't necessarily have the same prioritization for safety.
Well, I think they do, but they have other goals. Like they're really focused on regional travel. Because they're a state DOT, they're really looking at statewide travel patterns and where are trucks going, where are the people traveling through that corridor as a highway, as opposed to maybe other streets in Missoula that are local and we're trying to accommodate the neighborhood needs. They just have a different focus, and so there's always that tension of like, how do we find that middle ground of like achieving what they need to do, but also meeting our needs as a community. So it's challenging, and there often aren't easy answers to it. So, yeah. All right. Sorry, Logan. I'll talk too long.
Logan, after your presentation, will probably take a 5-minute break or so.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, I'm going to talk about the stuff that nobody really thinks about or cares about probably, but I think it's still important. It's the utilities that we all need, the water to our houses and the sewer away from their houses. I'm sorry, what'd you say? Oh, I thought so.
Water's good.
Water's good. we like water. We provide very good water here. So just briefly touch on the organization chart for utilities, utility operations and maintenance. I'm the Deputy Public Works Director for utilities, and then I oversee Missoula Water, which is the water division, our stormwater utility, and our wastewater utility. So collectively, that's 72 city employees that take care of all those utilities for the city. And within Missoula Water, we have various work groups. So we have a distribution group. They sort of work with the mains that are out in the streets. If there's a leak in the middle of the night, our guys are out there hiring contractors and fixing the leaks. And then the second box is service. These are the folks that are coming in people's homes and replacing meters, or you might have a leak, and so you call in, and so we'll dispatch somebody out there to help figure out where your leak is. The production, those are the folks that run the wells, the tanks, the pressure reducing valve stations, kind of all the things that, that's how we produce water and get it out of the ground and get it to your house. And then the last group is just our facilities. We have 80-some facilities in town that have to be maintained, for security, for landscape maintenance, that kind of thing. This is an overview of the water system. Don't really expect you to be able to see it all, but you'll see some kind of turquoise things. Those are the tanks. We have tanks all over town. You have to have a tank somewhere higher than where you're at. So where we're at right now, the water's coming out of Waterworks Hill is the tank that provides the pressure for everything north of the river. And south of the river, we have a 3 million gallon tank on Simon's Drive that provides the pressure for the entire area south of the river. So the water system is 40, this slide's a little old. We now have 42 groundwater wells. We're capable of producing about 74 million gallons per day of drinking water. We have 25 different storage tanks. The hills in town make it difficult. You have to, basically everywhere there's a hill, you always have to have a tank sitting above you, but it can't be too far above you because then the pressure's too high. So it's, you sort of pump water out of the valley and then up to the next tank and the next tank and the next tank. And so pretty soon you've pumped water from the ground all the way up 1,000 feet up to above the Mansion Heights development or whatever that's called now. So collectively we store about 10 million gallons of water in these tanks. And then, we have a real complicated distribution system. It's sort of unheard of, but we have 46 different pressure zones that are controlled by the tanks and then pressure reducing valve stations. So I'm probably getting a little too into the details. I'm sorry, I'm an engineer and this is what excites me, so I apologize. There's about 330 miles of water mains in town. So and a lot of them are old. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Turns out it's pretty hard to keep water in pipes that are 90 or 100 years old. So that's kind of our big challenge. Just talk about some of the maintenance that we do. We have 1,600 and some fire hydrants. We have 6,000 valves. They all have to be operated every year. We perform taps for new development or for replacement taps. If a tap is leaking, we do thousands of utility locates every year. As development happens or things get built, everybody always has to call in locates, and so you'll see the blue lines painted out on the street or the green lines for sewer. So anyways, that takes a lot of work. And then, customer service orders, we have 24,000 customers and a lot of them want something all the time. So, we're here to help. So, we install meters. We own the meter. They're typically in a meter pit out in front of the house, but older homes typically have the meter inside the house, usually in a basement. We do lots of chemical and bacteriological sampling to make sure that the water we provide you complies with all of the standards and is safe to drink. And then we have thousands of backflow devices that we require on various customers to make sure that people aren't putting things in the water that can come back out into the system and make you sick. The key challenges for the water utility, aging infrastructure, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We have 100-plus-year-old pipes in the ground. We have a lot of leakage. It's over half of the water that we pump out of the ground goes back into the ground. And we're not proud of that, but it's not an easy problem to fix, and so we're working hard to fix that. We have a very large carbon footprint. Public Works uses about 58% we produce about 58% of the emissions that the whole city operations create. Because pumping water out of the ground and then pumping it again to treat it, and just all the mechanical equipment at the treatment plant, it's all very power intensive. And then another challenge, inflation has just killed us the last few years. Just since 2019, the cost of replacing a water main has gone up about 45%. So that's been a real challenge for us. I won't get too far into the details, but if you look at these last couple bars out in the end, we have about 15 miles of pipe that are over 90 years old. And so this is metallic pipe, metallic pipe corrodes, and eventually you'll get leaks. So we've got, I guess, a backlog of old pipes that need to be replaced.
Can you tell us where those are located?
I mean, right behind this building, there's a patch in the street. There's what was called invasion pipe. The water company after World War II got a great deal on some surplus pipe, and it's the walls were about that thin 60 years ago, and now they're even.
Held up pretty well.
Yeah. So, anyways, they're everywhere. It's it's in the valley floor for the most part. It's obviously the South Hills that didn't develop until the 60s. So those pipes are 50 to 60 years old.
So you said the older pipes are metallic. What are newer pipes made out of?
We still put in metallic pipe.
Okay.
There's about a quarter of the system is PVC pipe. For maybe 20, 30 years, we were putting in PVC pipe, but it's got issues. We had a guy almost die in a tap down in a trench. A PVC pipe split when they were tapping it, and so the water company kind of went away from PVC pipe. We wrap it in polyethylene wrap now. So it protects it from corrosion, so it's going to last a long time. But a lot of these pipes, they were not cathodically protected, or didn't have any kind of barrier. They were just buried in the ground. So corrosion happens.
I remember me in an apartment building, and the water running through the pipe caused electrolysis, and pretty soon the pipe was total sieve. Is that the way?
That's what happens. It's not caused by the water running through the pipe, but it is electrolysis. It's electrons kind of moving around from different pipes have different rates of electrolysis. Like unfortunately, most of the service line pipes in Missoula are galvanized. There's probably 16,000, and the customers own these. 16,000 galvanized pipes in the ground, and they corrode much faster even than our mains do. And so, that 50% rate of leakage, I'm just certain that more than half of that is on the customer's service lines because there's so many galvanized lines out there. But yes, it's electrolysis. Just talk briefly about our priorities. So, we're trying to spend a lot of capital capital dollars on main replacements to, deal with that leakage issue. We've been installing an automated metering infrastructure system. We're about half done. So it's going to allow us, we put up a handful of towers around town. And so once all these, what we call AMI meters are in town, we won't have people driving around reading meters anymore. The water company used to have like 6 people in trucks all the time driving around reading meters. And right now we have 2, but once these are all in, those folks will be doing other things that the towers are in, they can read the meter every 15 minutes. So we get real-time information. We're working on developing a portal that the customer just can put on their phone, and it can tell you how much water you used in the last 15 minutes. It can put in, flags, like let's say you're away for the holidays or something. You can put a flag and say if my meter's using water it shouldn't be, then alert me. So it's going to be pretty cool for the customer. We're just looking to find and fix leaks because there's a lot of them out there, but they're super hard to find. Our valley gravels are just so porous that, in most cities in the country, if you have a large leak, the water just bubbles up out of the ground and you go fix it. That almost never happens here. Like, we find out about it, maybe the ground's thawed, because it does thaw the ground, or, it makes a lot of noise, and so a customer might call in and say, I'm hearing water or hearing noise in my water line. So, those are the ways we tend to find leaks. And then, we're just trying to reduce our carbon footprint. We want to reduce that leakage. We're looking at more efficient pumps. We're looking at drilling wells in places like, Missoula Electric Co-op's electric portfolio is 95% carbon-free. It's hydropower. And so that's something it's a priority we're working on is drilling a well out by the airport so that we can reduce the carbon footprint associated with pumping water. This just talks.
Sorry, can you just describe how that portfolio changes between the city and the airport in terms of like co-ops versus Northwestern?
Yeah, Northwestern is something like 65 or 68% hydro. So it's a lot of green power there, but the other 30 or 35% is coal or natural gas. But the Missoula Electric's portfolio is mostly from Bonneville Power, hydropower. So, we have to tally up our greenhouse gas emissions every year. And so if we're using power that's coming from hydro, it's 95% carbon-free, then it reduces our carbon footprint. This slide just talks about the capital dollars we're investing. So, if you look at 2023, we're investing about a little over $8 million, and about a little over $4 million of that's in water mains. We're trying to ramp it up to, say, $6 to $8 million a year in investing in water mains. And so, some of these years we're, in the $10 to $12 million range. So we're spending a lot of money trying to improve the system. This slide just talks about this up in the upper left. This little green box says, the goal is to replace 1% a year, which basically assumes that your pipe's going to last 100 years. And so that's kind of an industry standard. It's a reasonable number. It's what we're targeting. But to get there, that's 3.5 miles a year that we have to replace. So if you look in 2024 is the only year on here we're coming close. And we're close to 3 miles. But it's that kind of the inflation I've been talking about. It just killed us. And when prices went up 45%, it's like, well, that's, takes us 45% further from the goal we're trying to reach. So we're going to continue working on this and keep spending more money replacing these mains. This is a slide about leakage, and it's, the leakage has been going up and up since the beginning of Missoula, basically. But we feel pretty good. If you look at that last data point in March of 22, we finally have the curve going down. So we reduced our leakage by about 1,200 gallons a minute over I think that's actually a typo. I think it should say March of 23. I can't remember. Anyways, it was our most recent leakage study. It had reduced the leakage by about 1,200 gallons a minute. So we're pretty proud of that. We did a lot of main replacements last year, and you don't always know that when you're replacing a main, you're going to save water. Like we don't really know where the leaks are. We did a main about a block over here, and we knew it was leaking. It was, I think, 4 or 5 blocks in an alley, and it was kind of a brutal project, but I think that we're seeing some of the benefits of taking on that project. I'm on to stormwater. Tracy Campbell's our stormwater superintendent. We've got these are the main work groups. We do operations, maintenance, and then they do a lot of public outreach. And then the yellow boxes at the bottom, kind of one of the, I think the city is really good at sharing resources and coordinating on things. So, rather than hiring maintenance staff in stormwater, Brian Hensel's group, they're out on the streets, they're doing work on this, maintaining the street. And so, stormwater transfers funds. The employees actually sit in Brian's group, but they're doing work cleaning out the sumps and dry wells. So it's a great partnership. And then we have really top-notch people in our wastewater collection staff too. They have equipment to jet storm sewers or to TV if we want to see what's going on in a storm drain. So we share a lot of resources between the different work groups in Public Works. So there's 5 employees in the stormwater utility, and then supplemented with staff from these other work groups.
Question.
Yeah.
So if you have an issue with drains, not insufficient drains to clear the water from the roads, or the melting snow from the roads and whatnot, who do you call? Who do you contact to ask about?
Brian might answer that question. I mean, we have a website. The number's on our stormwater website. But do you know more, Brian, how I should answer that?
You can call stormwater or streets. We will work together to see what we can do with it.
Yeah, a lot of times, there's close to 10,000 stormwater inlets and dry wells in town. That's, these are these grates you see on every intersection. And for the most part, they're not connected to a pipe, right? Because what I was saying earlier, our gravels are so porous that through most of town, the stormwater just goes right back in the ground. And, those things plug up. There's, we can't clean them all every year because there's 10,000 of them. So they get leaves in them and things. So a lot of times that's just what needs to happen is we come and take a big vac truck and suck the stuff out, and then the water will drain back down in them. So the mission statement of the stormwater utility is it's committed to protecting public health and safety, natural resources, waterways, and our aquifer while meeting or exceeding state and federal environmental quality regulations. So these are just a couple pictures. In the upper picture is a vac truck, and that's Pat he's from our wastewater group helping out stormwater. Because we have some basins in town and things that get full of sediment, and so Pat helps us to dredge them out and clean them out. And then that's Carver standing in the river there doing some of our required sampling. Because we have to sample some of the storm drain pipes, but you also at the same time would sample the water it's discharging to, so you know kind of how you could be impacting it. So stormwater is all about regulatory compliance. What guides our work is the city has a general permit for stormwater discharges associated with municipal separate storm sewer systems. Kind of a mouthful. We all talk about it as the MS4 permit. All the big cities in Montana have one. So it's an EPA rule. So it's administered by DEQ under the authority of the US EPA. So that's really why we have a stormwater utility, is to comply with that MS4 permit. This is a picture of the stormwater infiltration gallery that was installed underneath Karis Park a year or so ago. So stormwater system in Missoula is, it's facilities to treat, collect, and transport stormwater. As I mentioned, we have more than 10,000 inlets and dry wells. So the dry wells are the things that just drain straight into the ground. And then we do have about 74 miles of storm drain pipe. And some of that we own, about half, and then about half of it is owned by other entities. Either MDT owns some, or a lot of subdivisions have storm drain pipes that we tend to own the stuff that's in the right of way, and then the subdivisions, they tend to own like the big detention ponds and things that were designed and built specifically for those subdivisions. And then the city also has flood control devices that are under that the stormwater utility is responsible for. So that's levees along the Clark Fork River, a flood wall kind of just upstream from Karis Park, and then we manage a high hazard dam, which is in the Playfair Park area, which is designed to handle floodwaters from the Paddy Creek drainage. Do lots of general maintenance. So, all these facilities must be routinely inspected and maintained to ensure they function as they were designed. So we use, like I talked about the dry wells, we vac them out. A lot of times they do just silt in. You can suck the leaves out, but a lot of silt gets down into the gravels too and eventually plugs them up. So that's Brian's crew helps us, replacing hundreds of those every year. We have to video pipes to see why they're not flowing or jet them out. We have some hydrodynamic separators. There's one that was installed in Karis Park just upstream of that infiltration gallery I showed you a minute ago. It's a big manhole chamber that has a kind of a vortex flow pattern, and the trash and large debris will settle out in those. So it makes it easier to get that stuff. We don't want it going down in the dry wells or discharging out into the rivers. We have a lot of detention basins in town. The picture here, I believe, is the sedimentation basin at Paddy Creek Drive. And then, we have lots of drainages that we have to, occasionally excavate and remove vegetation and things from some of these detention ponds. Some of the required sampling, so there's 58 different outfalls to the various rivers and streams that flow through town. We're required to sample 6 locations twice a year in the spring and fall during rainfall events. And so the typical things that we are sampling for are temperature, pH, metals, total suspended solids, chemical oxygen demand, nutrients, and bacteria. These are the things that have the potential to impact the water quality in our rivers and streams. Just briefly talk about the levee maintenance. So the red line shows one of the Army Corps permitted levees in town. It's Clark Fork Area 3, I think, and the Area 5 one is the one that we're doing maintenance on right now, which is down by the California Street Bridge. And then there's also levees that were permitted by the Army Corps on Grant Creek and on Patty Creek. So we have to inspect them annually. We have to remove vegetation from them, which is what's going on kind of right back here right now. And then occasionally they have to be recertified. And we're kind of near the end of that process right now for the Clark Fork levees. On to the wastewater utility, unless there's other questions. So wastewater is, there's two main groups. We have the collections group on the right, which is, they run the pipes and the lift stations that get the sewage from all the towns and all the homes and businesses down to the resource recovery facility. We used to call it the wastewater treatment plant, but at some point it occurred to us that we're not just treating things, we're actually recycling materials and recovering a lot of resources. So I think we feel a lot better thinking of it that way as a way to recover these resources. So that group includes a lab. We have several lab employees, and then we have facility operations and maintenance, and then the Garden City Compost, formerly Eco Compost, which back in 2016 the city acquired, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So the wastewater division has 35 employees that keep all of these facilities running. Little overview on the collection system. We have about 377 miles of sewer lines in town that collect the wastewater via gravity and take it to the treatment plant. But gravity doesn't always work, so we have 31 different locations where we have to lift it up so that it can then flow by gravity to the treatment plant. And sometimes we have pressurized force mains. But for the most part, the lift stations just bring it up to a higher elevation and then it flows by gravity. And then on the south side of town, we have about 1,800 step systems, which are called septic tank effluent pump systems, which were put in the 90s. The EPA provided some funds and encouraged the use of it, and they're not, we don't love them. There are 1,800 different tanks and pumps on people's property that we're responsible to maintain, and when they back up, we get phone calls in the middle of the night, and we have to go out and replace all those pumps. So they're not as handy as just relying on good old gravity to take the sewage away from your house. But they did allow you to put in lines more shallow because they're pressurized lines. A lot of our gravity sewer lines are 10, 12, 20 feet deep, and these step lines are only 6 feet deep like a water main. So they went in pretty cheaply, but they take a lot of maintenance. So talking a little bit about the maintenance that has to happen, all of our sewer mains are maintained using high pressure jetting and video inspection. So we jet out everything on a 2-year cycle, and some of the older parts of town that have a lot of root problems get jetted every year. Well, I guess it says here the older clay tile pipes are jetted every year. And then the PVC every other year. So kind of move on to the the resource recovery facility. This is a nice picture that kind of shows it all. You're probably all have heard of the poplar farm, which is kind of the big trees out there off of Mullen Road that we use to spray wastewater onto. The Garden City Compost, formerly Eco Compost, is this area here, and it's there largely because they combine, they take green waste from town, yard waste, clippings and tree trimmings, and combine it with the biosolids that we produce at the wastewater plant, and they turn it into a high quality compost product. And then just the wastewater treatment facility are these structures here, and I'll talk in more detail about all of that. Without getting into too many details, just want to give you kind of an overview of how the wastewater treatment process works. So it's in the 60s, or prior to the 60s, the sewer pipes in town just literally ran into the river. Like there was zero treatment at all. It was just dilution is a solution. You put it in the river and it flows away. But starting in the 60s, people started realizing that wasn't so good. So they put in primary treatment, which is just a kind of a physical settling process. So, and this has been improved, but this is still kind of how wastewater flows into the plant. So it flows in, we have some big bar screens that take off the rags and just the large debris. And that stuff goes to the landfill. And then we have to pump it up because it comes in very, very deep below the river. And then we remove grit from it, sand and other things, and that also goes to the landfill. And then the wastewater flows into these large clarifiers for just settling. And as this shows, the water flows off the top to go to secondary treatment, which I'll get to, and then the solids, about half of the organics just settle out in these primary digesters. And so those go to anaerobic digestion, which I'll cover here in a minute. So that the liquid that flows off the top of the clarifiers after the primary treatment now goes into a biological process called biological nutrient removal. It's some really smart people came up with how to make bugs do what we want them to do, and it's really fascinating. I mean, I know I'm a geeky engineer, but sometime you ought to go check out the treatment plant and get a tour because it's really unbelievable what happens out there. So these bioreactors, there's an anoxic zone where there's no oxygen, and then an anaerobic zone, and then we blast it with oxygen, and the bugs kind of remove all the organics. And then there's a second round of these clarifiers to settle out. Basically, at that point, it's bugs. It's no longer sewage. And so you're trying to settle the bugs out, and they get kind of recycled back so they can kind of consume more of the organics. The liquid flows off the top of these clarifiers into UV disinfection and then off into the river. But then, like I said, we collect the solids here. Some of it gets recycled, and then a lot of it gets wasted, and that's what becomes the biosolids that go next door to Garden City compost. So as I talked about this, the solids that came off the primary clarifiers run into this fermenter to create volatile fatty acids that are required in that biological process. And then from there, the solids flow into the primary digester, which is an anaerobic tank. It's heated. There's a lot of methane production that occurs in there and just breakdown of these organics. And so the red pipes show that, that methane we can capture, and we can either burn it for heat because this is heated, so that's one of the things we do with it. But then, and I'll show you in a minute, we have a big cogeneration facility which turns it into electricity to help run the plant. So it's kind of just a big recycling system. And then the secondary sludge, it doesn't get digested. It kind of comes down here. It gets mixed, it gets dewatered, and then the biosolids just basically go over the fence on a conveyor belt over to Garden City Harvest, or Garden City Compost, excuse me. Eventually to Garden City Harvest. Freudian slip, I apologize.
Where does the secondary sludge come from?
It comes from those secondary clarifiers. So if we back up a slide, can you back it up, Lori? So these are the secondary clarifiers.
Oh, okay.
So they're just, those don't require digestion. Like the primary stuff it's got a lot of organics. It's kind of nasty stuff, so it needs to be treated through that digestion process. But at this point, it's just kind of bugs that are dead. And
how do you deal with the household chemicals, such as you use Comet or bleach to clean, your sink, and that goes down the drain? How does that?
They're just not harmful, honestly. It's there's
they're
8.
diluted to the point.
Yeah,
where
they're
pretty much harmless.
Right. I mean, there's things that people can pump in that could kill all the bugs, but household cleaners are not in that category. We have 8 million gallons a day that are, there's a lot of water flowing in there all the time, and it's just kind of diluted out. So it's a good question.
Are there for commercial, industrial kind of contributors that make the system really hard to manage?
Yeah, so we have an industrial pre-treatment program. We monitor all of what the industrial discharges are discharging. I don't know the details. I don't know if any of them are required to treat separately, but they pay a higher rate for all. Like we have specific charges for organics, for nutrients that they're discharging, because that's we're spending a lot to remove those things here, and so the dischargers that are putting a lot into the system pay more. But we also monitor it to make sure they're not sending out anything nasty that's going to interrupt the biological process.
Did you say
Well, the primary clarifiers, that was built in 1962. And then the biological nutrient removal plant was built in, I think, 99, 2000. And then a new headworks was built, like I talked about those screens and, or facilities to remove odor control, or to provide odor control. That was built like in 2010.
So how close to capacity are we with the growth that we're seeing?
Our facilities plan shows that we have plenty of capacity till like the planning period was like 2037. But there's a big unknown. The state is really ratcheting down what we can discharge for nutrients. So, our permit it's expired and it's administratively extended because the state is, there's all kinds of debates over what to do with these nutrient limits. So once the new permit comes out, it's just hard to say. Like hydraulically, we have lots of capacity, but if those nutrient limits get ratcheted way down, then we're gonna have to deal with the nutrients.
Shipping it somewhere else, you mean?
No, well, either providing a higher level of treatment,
Right.
which is gonna be lots more power consumption. Like, they could make us put in membranes. So, there's always ways to remove it, but it could be hundreds of millions of dollars and lots more power consumed. So, we also have the poplar plant next door. About 10% of what we produce right now is going out to water poplar. So that's, land application's always an option.
Is there another name that we call the poplar farm?
Some people lovingly refer to it as the poopler farm, I believe is what you're looking for.
So when do you harvest the poplars?
Well, that's a very good question. We're evaluating that. When that facility was built, there was a mill out in Oregon where the poplars were going to get shipped. That mill closed down. There's actually not a market for poplars, so we're kind of evaluating right now what the future is for poplars. The poplars is not the only crop that we can grow out there. There's lots of other things that we can grow. There's really not. If you want poplar trees, we can maybe even deliver them to you. So that's something we're working on. I think I have a couple more slides, but I've talked about all this stuff, and I don't think I really need to cover it anymore. We're just talking about a lot of the recovery that we do out there. Just real quick, this is the cogen facility. It generates about 200 kilowatts of electricity. We're recycling about a quarter of the plant's electric needs just from that methane gas that is produced. This is something we're pretty proud of. It's not operational yet because of shipping delays and obtaining chips, but we put about 1,000 solar panels out there last year, and they're supposed to go online later this month. So it's going to produce about 650,000 kilowatt hours a year, supply about 20% of the plant's needs. And it's actually, we didn't pay for it. We have a power purchase agreement with a third party that put it all in, and we just agreed to pay the kilowatt hour price, and over time we're going to save money because it's not going to it's locked in for 25 years, and Northwest Energy's power is not locked in for 25 years, so it's a really good deal. Garden City Compost, I maybe not talk too much here. We produce about 24,000 cubic yards per year of compost using the biosolids and the wood waste. I think I'll blast through this. This is just kind of the capital spending, the wastewater utilities. We're investing a lot of money also. And just the last thing, Missoula here, our rates combined for water, wastewater, and stormwater are the lowest in the state. So, your wastewater bill is like $17 a month or something. It's incredibly cheap for everything that this group does. So, we're pretty proud of that. We need to raise them, but we do a lot with kind of minimal resources. So, that's it, unless there's other questions.
Who's in charge of the drainage, water ditches? Does that make sense?
The irrigation ditches?
Yeah, the irrigation.
Those are, like Missoula Irrigation District is the main one in town. There's, they're irrigation districts.
Okay.
Not us, unfortunately. So, yeah. Yes, sir?
If I heard you correctly, you say back to drinking water, you can produce up to 74 million gallons a day. Have you ever come close where you needed to produce that much?
No, I think back in 2007, we hit 52 million gallons a day when it got really, hit 107 degrees, if you remember that. So that's the most we've ever produced. It's like the last 5 or 10 years, we don't really exceed about 45 million gallons a day. And as we reduce leakage, we hope to keep reducing that over time. But so yeah, we have lots of capacity to produce water.
Does all of our water come from the aquifer, or do we have any other sources?
It's all from the Missoula aquifer, excuse me. I mean, we have like a well up in the Rattlesnake. We have a couple out in East Missoula, but it's all effectively the Missoula aquifer.
So you sort of answered my question, but do we actively participate in any other water banking?
I'm not totally sure what you mean by that, but the city participated in acquiring the Flynn Lowney ditch, and so we're working on in-stream flow through the Clark Fork Coalition
Hear about places running out of water.
Right.
And so,
we're really blessed. I mean, recently I'm starting to see some declining trend in aquifer levels, so I think it's something we have to pay attention to. We're nowhere near where the other cities are having to ration. I mean, we could get to that point. We need to keep an eye on it, but it's not something to be concerned about right now. I mean, we definitely want to be looking at it because as the climate changes, it could get worse for sure. Well, thank you all.
thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Logan and Aaron. We're gonna just take a 5-minute break. We have some goodies here. The restroom is down the hall.
Yeah, I can lead a tour of the building.
Take a 5-minute break, and then we've got Brian Hensel here for street.
I'm Brian Hensel, Deputy Public Works Director for City of Missoula Streets, and I'd like to preface my presentation by saying there are no questions allowed for leaf collection, so don't even try.
Come on.
I'm kidding. No, I'm hoping we should touch on it. Maybe you guys don't have questions on it, but we'll touch on it. So, Street Maintenance Operation Division, everyone thinks they know what that is, right? Plowing, paving, patching, chip sealing. There's a lot more to it. We have some other divisions that you may not be aware of that also fall under streets. Even the cemetery. That one won't take long to talk about. It's kind of dead over there, so. I said it last year and I had the same effect. I got to get a new joke for cemetery. Help me think of one. We have cemetery, comp shop signals, and that's street signals, and also the street lighting. And street maintenance, which is our biggest division, then traffic services, they do signing, striping, sign replacement. Oh, and I forgot our wonderful admin assistant, Stacia. I wish she could be here. I invited her, but she absolutely said no. Some of you may have talked to her if you call. All right, city cemetery. So Brett Gilman's our superintendent. He does a great job. Our admin, Sarah, and operation maintenance is his staff. I don't know if any of you have been to our cemetery, but it's amazing. It is well kept, it's beautiful, it's a great green space. It's old. It was established in 1884. The city bought it for $1 in 1901. So, because it's such a high dollar making revenue and institution. So, but it is absolutely beautiful. There's over 21,000 internments there. There's some amazing folks that are historic from Missoula. And I can't remember a single one of them right now. But if you go out there, that our staff, they can show you and talk to you about some of the history. But it's relaxing, it's nice, you can bird watch, you can walk your dog. I remember back in the days when I was stressed over at streets, I'd go see the old funeral director and we would have a cigarette and relax because it's nice. You don't have to smoke, but you can go over there and take a deep breath. We're always trying to encourage other uses for it to enjoy that green space. So I would encourage you, if you haven't been there, take a look. 80 acres of trees, I kind of went through it. If you ever need our services, our staff is great. They'll help you. They'll tell you what we can do for you. And I think we're less expensive than a lot of the private ones. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but we are. We're always looking for ways to improve the cemetery, trying to encourage more public involvement, more access. We're looking at a building upgrade. We just put in a new steel shed that we desperately needed for storing some of our equipment and fertilizer. So we're making some headway. We actually are doing, how do you say this? We make money, and that's good, but people have had to pass away for us, so it's always kind of a catch-22. This last year and the year before, we've done well on our revenue. The cemetery is still subsidized by the city. what are we, about 50%? Oh, no, it's more than that. It's like 60 to 70%. So we don't pay for everything ourselves with the revenue we generate. But it's ours, we will maintain it forever. Next one, Lori, please. All right, street maintenance and operations. So you guys all know what the City of Missoula limits are for the most part, but how many of you know also that we have the MDT route? Sounds like a lot of you did because you know about Russell and Bear Tracks. So in addition to those MDT projects that we work and partner with MDT, we also have a maintenance agreement. So that means that MDT contracts with the city, and it's not just streets, Parks does a little bit of work with it too, but we maintain some of that infrastructure on those state highways. We plow, we pave, we sweep, we do striping, we maintain their signals. And so this maintenance agreement, they pay us to do this, so we do make revenue on that one. And that contract right now is around $576,000 is what we get per year. And that's a biannual 2-year contract. All right, can you do the next one? This is just kind of some stats here right now. We're around 313 miles of city streets, but if I tell you that now, by next week it'll change. You guys see some of the growth going on around Missoula, like West Reserve. So that's a moving number. MDT routes pretty much have stayed the same. City limits, that's probably already, that one's probably wrong like 20 minutes ago. So, but 74,000, 75, that one's probably moving up also, I think. Next one, Lauren. So I apologize that this is kind of small, but you can see these are the maintenance agreement state routes. Now this isn't all of them, but these are the ones that we've defined in the contract. Actually, like Broadway here, it is within city limits, but it continues further on, even through the newly annexed area. The maintenance chief asked me if I wanted to continue Broadway. I said no, because I have enough to do for them, and they probably wouldn't want to pay me anymore to maintain it. So this is all on our website if you want to take a closer look at it. Next one. So I mentioned here's the 3 divisions that all participate in not only maintaining the MDT routes, but also city streets. And we got signals, street lights, comp shop, traffic service, street maintenance. I'll go into all these. Next one, Lori. All right, so our signals comp shop, we have 1 superintendent and 3 technicians. They maintain the city-owned traffic signals, which are only 11. When I first got this job as the deputy director, I thought we had more than that. But most of them are MDTs, and they are covered under that maintenance agreement. So we get paid to maintain those. Pardon me? Oh, was that a question?
Talking out
Oh,
loud.
that's fine. My left hearing is not great, so. And then the city also maintains 85 streetlights and poles. Now, there's a lot more streetlights in this town than 85. But those are also, they may be owned, Northwestern Energy may lease them. There may be lighting districts that are owned by adjacent property owners. So these are the ones that the city owns and maintains. And this is all by our comp shop signals. They also, they repair, maintain, install. This is called an RRFB, rectangular rapid flashing beacon. These are kind of cool. These will improve the safety at pedestrian crossings. And we try to install some of these every year. They're somewhat expensive. We suffer with the inflation too that Logan mentioned. But these are an excellent tool for improving pedestrian crossings. And we're starting to get more and more. They are solar powered too, which is nice. Although the one at Sentinel, someone stole the solar panel off. Next one, Lord.
Are there restrictions on types of roads that those can be on?
So remember, I think it was Aaron mentioned the NTMP.
Yep.
So that's, did you give them the acronym, Neighborhood Transportation Management Planning?
No, you just did.
So Missoula, the city loves acronyms, and we have teams for a lot of things. That's one of them. So not only just for RFVs, but everyone says, why didn't you put a stop sign here? Or why don't you change the speed limit? So the NTMP focuses on local streets, the low volume streets where probably most of you live. So we can obviously not afford the cost, the additional maintenance to just go pound these in whenever somebody says, oh, someone's speeding on my street. I want an RRFB or I want a roundabout. Well, all that stuff costs money. We have to maintain it. So Ben Weiss on Aaron's team, he's the head of the NTMP. He starts the process and they do analysis, they do speed analysis, they do crash history. There's a whole bunch that goes into it before these can be put up. And it's basically a way to manage limited resources and also look at all the factors that can necessitate increased safety. Okay, great question though. Yes?
Brian, can you tell us how much an RFP costs approximately?
No, we're not entertaining that question either.
Okay.
I think they're running about $7,000. So they're not terrible. But those can add up real quick too. And then we have to maintain them, especially if high school kids steal the solar panels off.
How many do you think there are in Missoula?
Harry, do you have any idea? I can't.
20, 30?
Who said that?
Pretty
Oh,
well.
Charlotte, why don't you come up here? You can go.
I'm on the website.
23, Charlotte, thank you.
Look, the school crossing lines.
All right, so this is a pretty exciting picture. Our comp shop signals, they also maintain all the radio communications for police, fire, streets themselves. So we have two-way radio capabilities. We have 2 microwave tower repeater sites. I know enough about these to be dangerous. If some of our techs were here, they could talk to you about these for a couple hours. But we have 2 sites. We are currently working with the county. Oh, and I'm sorry, let me step back. We also share some of the county's repeater sites so that we have good radio communication. And we completed phase 1 to upgrade our radio system because our stuff was getting so antiquated that it was DOS based. Yeah, and so when some of our communications would go down, our former superintendent was looking on eBay to try and find used parts. So that first phase, I believe, was 1.2 million. We're now entering into the second phase, which will bump us up to 800 megahertz, which is, you know, what the rest of the world uses. So we're gonna start on that coming up, so that'll be phase 2. All right, next one, Lori. Oh, go back. All right, so another one of the functions of that comp shop signals is, you see the police cars? Those police cars are like a rolling IT department. So our guys install all the electronics, the radio communications, everything. This is a big part of their work. They were able to get 14 vehicles done. Hopefully we can keep moving up because police cars, the police department are real hard on their vehicles, so they're always getting new ones. And then if they change brands, these are a lot of work for us. But we can also maintain them, and if something goes wrong with this, it's our guys put them in. They're the best ones to know how to fix it. So next one, Lori. Another aspect of that comp shop signals is they review development plans for street lighting so that when developers want to put in street lighting, or have to, because the city made them, that they put in the kind that we want, that we know we can get parts for, and we can repair down the road. Next one, Lori. All right, traffic services. So signing and striping, you've probably seen them out there painting streets, and do you ever drive through that when it's fresh? Get a little free undercoating. I've done that on my city truck. I had some yellow polka dots for a while. So these guys really do a great job. They go out in 93 miles of long lane striping. They also do pedestrian crossings refresh. They're trying some, well, we've done them now for a couple of years. They do some thermalay pre-mark to make our ped crossings last longer. We've changed our paint to get, we used to only get about a year out of some of our long line striping, and now we switched to a different kind. We're maybe seeing 2 or 3 years, but it also depends on traffic. So you can see, they probably, I don't know how many crosswalks they do in a year, but it's a big job. So that's another thing. In the NTMP, everybody wants to stripe crosswalk. Well, every one of these we have to maintain. So those also have to go through that process. And a legal crosswalk does not have to be striped necessarily. But does it add a factor of safety? Potentially. But then we got to come back and paint them. We already have more than we can keep up with. But we've changed also the type of product we're using. We're getting longer life out of these piano keys, for example. Yeah.
So I noticed some crosswalks have the 2 lines that just go across, and then there's ones like that are striped.
Yep.
How do you decide which one to put down?
Goes through the NTMP.
Okay.
These are more expensive. And then you throw in the green ones for the bikes. Yeah. All right, next one, Lori, please. Another big part of what they do is they replace signs. Signs actually have a life on them. Did you know if their retro reflectivity wears out, they should be replaced? I don't know, there's what, 100,000 signs maybe. They also get stolen. There are some particular favorite ones like Mary Jane. We can't keep that one.
Let's call it MJ.
I think they did.
Yeah, I think they changed this.
Yeah. Or if some of the signs might match a person's name, like up in Linda Vista, You'd be amazed how many signs get stolen around here. I bet if we could go to U of M and raid a dormitory, I could probably get the inventory for enough. All right, next one, Lori. Besides, they even have to clean signs, delineators. The median on the Reserve Street Bridge, you ever seen those little median reflectors?
Yeah.
Those things get dirty within minutes. So these guys have to go out there with a pull-behind trailer or power washer, clean those off. These guys always have stuff to do. All right, next one. I'm going fast, I apologize here. Also under that MDT contract, these guys, there's several places where they go out and shovel the sidewalks on the MDT routes because MDT is the adjacent property owner. You guys all know about the city's sidewalk shoveling deal. We all love that. Big support. All right, well, sometimes the adjacent property is not always, no. Well, you know, but there's no one living there, or it's an MDT, like on on-ramp. So these guys will go out and shovel those sidewalks where it's not always quite obvious who the adjacent property owner is. They do a great job on it, too. They also, Aaron talked about some of our traffic management quick build products or projects that we've done. Well, traffic services are the ones that go out and install those. This is the one at 3rd and Myrtle. And this was kind of cool. You would think this was paint. This is actually that pre-marked thermal lay where they lay it down and they have like a big hair dryer that heats it. So those should last, I don't know, maybe forever. Well, they won't be forever, but you know, maybe 10, 15 years because they're not getting driven over. Yes?
Is that a similar type of thing as like the bulb outs by some of the schools?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Not a big
So-
fan of those.
Well, this is a hell of a lot cheaper for your taxes,
Yeah.
okay? Otherwise, a full-blown bulb out with curb all the way around it,
Uh-huh.
upgraded ADA ramps, and also stormwater. Those bulb outs, where's all your storm drains at? Right in the corner. Well, what if you bulb it out and the water can't get there anymore? Well, these don't affect that. And the big deal on this is improves traffic safety. They slow people down. They can be a little bit of a pain for me to maintain sometimes with snow plowing, but the trade-off is improved public safety. All right.
Did you eliminate the bulb outs in the future then? Because of these?
Probably not. These are more temporary, Barb, until which point the city can acquire funding to put them in permanently.
I think the bulb outs would be hard for the snow plowers.
Occasionally. They get a few gouges in them once in a while. All right, next one, Lori, thank you. Another part of it too is Aaron talked about, well, the MTP and all the studies that go into assessing local street speeding issues. Well, we have our speed trailers and traffic services, they're the one that go out and do those counts. Chad Pancake is the superintendent. He also reviews quite a bit of the private development street plans. Same deal as we want these guys to put in the type of signs that we can use and that we can maintain. So he spends a fair amount of time reviewing plans. All right, next one. Let's see. Oh, grinding sidewalks. This is a concrete grinder. They work in the downtown area because that's where our major pedestrian traffic is. You guys have all seen sidewalks that get heaved up. These go out and they grind those down to make them safe. And that actually, there for a while, the city was really struggling with some trips and falls on those huge sidewalks. Well, this program, I think, knocked our mod factor down by, I don't know, 40% when it was implemented several years ago. And they do some miscellaneous stuff. They help police department with things. Keep going, Lord. All right, street maintenance. So I was the street superintendent for 18 years before they promoted me to deputy director because no one else would take this job. I'm kidding. I enjoy my job most of the time. All right, so you guys have all seen street sweeping. This is one of our bigger efforts. We have about 7 or 8 vacuum sweepers. We have 3 mechanicals, and we try to sweep the city 4 times a year. One time is usually in conjunction with leaf collection, so last year we're a little behind on that one, but it will happen. The sweeping program is really important for air quality and also for maintaining water quality. So, you know, streets and stormwater, we have to work together. If their stormwater infrastructure doesn't work, then my asphalt falls apart. A lot of times, if there's no streets to drain into their stormwater, why the hell are they here, right? So we work together. And prior to the creation of the stormwater district, streets took care of all the stormwater. But we didn't have as many regulations to follow in those days. So I was very thankful when that stormwater district was created. All right, next one, Lori.
How does street sweeping improve air quality?
Street sweeping?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, you get, how long?
Because of dust? Okay.
I was born in this town in 1969. Remember they used to sand everything? Okay, so in 1995, Missoula's air quality was atrocious. They would no longer let us use sand. We had to switch to the mag chloride, and it was all because of the fugitive particulate. That's how. It's a big deal. As a matter of fact, in the wintertime, we're supposed to sweep when it's 32 degrees and rising in the wintertime. Now, I think this year it hasn't happened very often, but that's tough to do because let's say it's 32 at say noon, and then by 3 o'clock it's below 32, and I've got water on the streets. What happens at about 4 o'clock?
Frozen.
You got her. But this winter's been exceptional. Oftentimes our winters are fairly mild, and I've swept for a couple months in the wintertime. This year's not much. Yes.
Is there additional funding that, I guess, just increases how often, like, the street sweeping happens? I feel like I see them multiple times a week, if not every day on the west side in the summer.
Yeah. So, sweeping is getting to be tough for us to keep up with, especially as we're moving west. All the new developments, yeah, that's all brand new asphalt, new paint. The asphalt maintenance is gonna be fine for several years. Still have to sweep them, still have to plow them, right? My crew size hasn't changed in years. I would like to double it. Sweepers, that one right there, oh, that other slide, about 300 grand, actually more than 300 grand a piece. Now, we've been fortunate in the past, part of those initial purchase price was funded by the CMAQ program, Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, that's a federal acronym, not mine. Where the feds would match, we pay 16%, the feds would pay for the rest. We have not been able to secure that federal funding since 2017. I need new sweepers bad. The life of a sweeper is about 5 years. My newest ones are 7 years old. I think this year, I'm hearing information that the vendors can comply with the Build America, Buy America, so I'm very optimistic that hopefully by next year I'll have at least 4 new vacuum sweepers. Okay? But yeah, I would like to sweep more often. All right, next one. All right, scratch this one off. No, obviously, leaf collection's one of the much appreciated services we do. I've often thought that if I gave the citizens 2 choices, or a choice, you can keep snow ops or leaf collection. I'm not sure which one they would pick.
I do too.
Do you? Well,
I would prefer to pick up my own leaves than to put them in the street and have what happened this year.
and there's both sides.
Yeah.
So during leaf season, we just get swamped with phone calls. People really appreciate it. They want to know where we're going to be, why we didn't get their leaves, how come we're behind schedule. It's a nightmare for us. And normally, when we should have been doing it in the fall, we're always going up against, okay, when's the first snowfall gonna hit? Because the same people that do leaf collection are the same ones that plow. So when it snows, I gotta pull everyone off leaf collection, then our schedule's blown up. So it's always, we never get it done on schedule. We oftentimes will get shut down part way through. We rarely get the sweeping done. We have pretty good luck at doing the bulk collection, this is a good picture. This is where you've seen the loaders working in tandems. This is dumping it into our garbage truck. I bought that garbage truck from Deer Lodge Surplus for $30,000. That one garbage truck can haul as many leaves as 4 tandems because it can compact them. I'd like to get another one. Big thing I should say, part of the reason we do leaf collection, I always get the question, well, why do you do leaf collection? You're spending taxpayer dollars, you could be doing other things. We have to pick the leaves up that would naturally fall into the street anyway. Now, do we have to take the leaves that people rake into the street? That's up to you guys and council to decide. But we still have to sweep them. We still have to pick them up. Otherwise, they plug the stormwater inlets, they make pools on the water, and there's even talk about some of the nutrients as the leaves degrade, nitrogen and phosphorus getting into the stormwater infrastructure. So we definitely need to get them picked up. All right, next one. I could go on and on about leaf collection. One thing, milling and paving. The city of Missoula is fortunate. We pretty much have a full-service paving crew, and we do a great job. It's probably my favorite time of year because I really enjoy working for the citizens of this town, and when I can go fix the street and they call me and tell me thank you, it's a great feeling. I just wish I could do more. It's expensive. The weather's always fighting me. There was issues last year with asphalt availability. Our equipment would break down. We couldn't get parts, or if we could, they'd be 6 months out. I lose my big roller on my paving crew, I'm done. We had that all the time last year. I hope this summer's better. Last year we did 4.3 miles, which is a little bit lower than usual because of some of those issues I mentioned. I'd like to see that closer to 6 to 8. Actually, I'd like to see it 40 or 50, but I need a whole other paving crew. All right, next one, Lori. Chip sealing. So, another thing we're fortunate is we have a full chip seal crew and all the equipment we need. And chip sealing, bar none, is the best way to maintain asphalt. I don't care what anybody else tells you. It seals the street, it's like painting, and then you put a friction course that protects the asphalt from UV deterioration, and then you don't slide as much in the winter. Last summer we only did 9.3 miles. The reason for that was I couldn't prep the streets before we chip because I couldn't get the asphalt when I needed it. So if I can't prep them, it's a waste of your money for me to chip seal. So I had to cut the program pretty much in half last year. But it's a great program to do it, and we're lucky we can do it. As a matter of fact, Missoula County, I understand they're gonna get into buying all their own chip seal equipment too. So I'm happy. As a Missoula County resident, I don't live in the city, so I was happy. And they've been calling me, and we've been working together to get them going on it.
So otherwise you'd have to outsource that if
Yeah.
you didn't have your own equipment.
Oh, it's expensive.
Yeah.
All right, next one, Lori, please. Oh, so leaf collection and potholes, my other favorite one. I often joke that when I retire, my goal is to have that number be 0 one year.
Right.
Yeah, I know, that's not gonna happen.
It's winter in Montana.
9,000, over 8,000 potholes so far. We track every one of them. Wintertime can be challenging because the hot plants aren't open. When I say hot plants, that's hot mix asphalt. You know, you can go to Knife River Western and buy the mix. In the wintertime, you have to use what's called a cold patch, which is a high performance asphalt product that has some secret special ingredients in it, but it actually works really well. The only problem is it's about $400 a ton. I can buy hot mix for this year, it's 65 a ton. So it's expensive. But it does work better than hot mix, plus it's really our only option in the wintertime. Now the only issue is, say, like this street right here, they're patching this pothole. See all this asphalt around it? It's shot, it's done. We're gonna patch this one and then another one will be here and over here. This street has served its useful life. It needs to be milled up and redone. But in the wintertime, what choice do we have? I can't go pave that in January. And then hopefully in the summer I can come back and fix areas like this. But there's a lot more of those than I can do. Next one. Snow plowing, this winter has been challenging for sure. I don't know if you are familiar with the priority system that we have. Over 60% of city streets are priority 1, 2s, or 3s. We do that as a way to balance limited resources. The onset of a snowstorm, our crews mobilize, they go work on priority 1s, Russell, Reserve, Higgins, Mount, Garrett. They work on those pretty much until it quits snowing. You get a long-term event, we can go plow, sand, de-ice, and 20 minutes later, looks like we weren't even there. Imagine if I plowed and de-iced Reserve once and then took off.
Yeah.
Doesn't work, does it? So oftentimes, that priority crew, they don't even move on to their number 2s until it quits snowing. So often I get, why haven't you plowed my street? It's been snowing for 2 days. That's why. Now, fortunately, and I think Myrta was here, maybe Gwen too, about 4 or 5 years ago, I requested and was given 4 more FTEs, full-time employees, with the sole intent to improve our snow ops. And what I did was I traded in 2.5 seasonals, and I think it only cost like a half an additional FTE so that I could put those 4 FTEs, and then I pulled 1 person off the priority plows. They don't have to deal with priorities. All they do is go into your local neighborhoods from 8 to 5. So that's 5 pickup plows. They don't have to deal with priorities. At the onset of snow, they go hit those local streets. I don't know if any of you have seen those. But it reduced my complaints and my phone calls every winter, every snow event. I couldn't even tell you, like 50, 60, 80%, just depends how bad it snows. Now, the one thing it did though, is you know how when we plow your street, we plug your mailbox, your driveway, those calls went up. And unfortunately, I don't have the ability to open up and plow something like 11,000 driveways. Now, occasionally, we can turn them a little bit, but every time I turn the plow to open up someone's driveway, it slows them down. In the middle of a snowstorm, I'm not gonna do that. You're gonna have to shovel. That's the way it goes. And if you're on a priority, it's probably never gonna happen. That map is on our website. And I apologize, I'm going quick here. I am out of time. Lori, next one. Logan mentioned we work with streets, so stormwater used to be under streets, and we clean sumps, we redig sumps that aren't working, and we install new sumps. A sump is simply a hole in the ground with drain rock around it, and that's where the water goes and drains it. I could go in on those two. We're looking at some secondary treatment options and modifying how we do this. We also clean some of the catch basins on the pipe storm inlets. Next one. Anytime we dig a new sump, or if we're paving across a pedestrian crossing, a head crossing, and the ramps are out of spec, we're supposed to redo the ramps. So that one you can see we either redug or put a new sump in. It had ramps that were old, not in spec. We had to also do all that new concrete and install those truncated domes. That's a process. Okay, this one, and you have to do the concrete first before you pave. So when I look at some of these bigger overlays in these projects, I gotta look, okay, how many ADA ramps do I gotta do? Am I gonna be able to get all those done? Sometimes it's tough to do. Yes, sir.
So are you installing those as you go? So when you're maintaining a street, at the same time you're doing the maintenance, you
Trying
install
to.
those? Okay.
Trying to. I have a 2 to 3 person concrete crew. Next, oh yeah, we only did 16 last year. Crack sealing mastic. We put a big effort on Brooks last summer. You guys have seen those black ribbons on Brooks? That was our crew with the mastic. MDT reimbursed us for all the materials because that's a state route. That's under that maintenance agreement. Next one. We also blade all your alleys. We will not pave your alleys, but if they've been paved, we will patch potholes. If you got a dirt alley and you want to have it paved, you got to get together with your property or your adjacent, your neighbors, and then get it paved. Next one. This is a speed table. This one was on Missoula Ave. We did this one 2 years ago. This is also part of the NTMP where we have local streets with speeding problems. These are, in my opinion, extremely effective. It's kind of a glorified speed bump. They don't take a terrible amount of time and they're not terribly expensive. We've done, what did we do, 4 on Missoula, and I did 2 or 3 on Simons and Normans. More to come. Next one. So our funding source is Road District 1. We also get a little over, what is it, like 1.2 million from the gas tax. Not the local option, that one was taken away. And then also bridge and road safety. That BARSA fund typically will go to bigger projects, and that's shared amongst Aaron's team and then also streets. All right, questions. And I apologize, I could have spent a lot more time. But I always get pounded with questions, so I thought I'd leave some time for that. Yes, sir.
I noticed all the bicycle paths are plowed. Does Parks do that, or do you do that?
If you're talking, the ones that are not adjacent to a street,
Yeah.
those are parks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. That's it? Yes.
I'm curious about lighting. So I live up in South Hills, and those lights going up Hillview are amazing, absolutely amazing. But then you get into my neighborhood right above Chief Charlo, and it's just so dark. And there's a park there, but it's just so dark.
So those lighting districts are complicated, and I'm probably not the one to talk about establishing them. I could maybe tell you a little bit on what you do when the bulb goes out. I wish Jeremy was here. it's a tough deal. It's complicated dealing with Northwestern Energy or setting up a lighting district. There's a lot to it. I could probably refer you to somebody if that's something you wanted to entertain.
One of my friends this afternoon was saying the manhole covers are sinking, and so then you have this.
In a few places.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens. So this time of year, as you're getting this freeze-thaw cycle, especially around sumps, that water gets in there, then it freezes, and then that can happen. We just looked at one today over on England that I gotta fix. So, lovely Missoula winter.
Well, thank you, Public Works, and everyone